Well, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists has helped lead a project with newsrooms around the world into the global ride-hailing company Uber. A whistleblower and former top lobbyist for Uber has made available a trove of evidence showing just how the US-based company allegedly gained its global dominance using uncompetitive methods in some cases. Douglas Macmillan at the Washington Post looked into some of the files, in part how Uber operated in South Africa, and he joins us now. Douglas, thank you for your time this afternoon. I wonder, when you look, your newsroom and several other newsrooms across the world really have been poring over these documents, and when you look at it, can you talk to us a bit about some of the recurring themes that came out of how Uber practiced or tried to get global domination?
Yeah, so these documents cover the years of Uber's fastest global expansion, 2013 to 2017. And one of the things that stood out to me, I was a beat reporter covering Uber through most of those years, and I'm pretty familiar with the company and many of the people who were at the company. There's a story that people understand about Uber, that it kind of stretched the limits, stretched the boundaries of the law, that it used hardball, aggressive tactics to expand in many countries. But these documents kind of show that it went further than most people realize. And some of the themes that popped up were that Uber executives frequently were not placing the well-being of drivers first. And, their service really depended upon rapidly recruiting many drivers to the service. And, you would think that a company that relies so much on, these hundreds of thousands, millions of people who, drive all the passengers in an Uber car from point A to point B would try to put the interests of these drivers first. But in many cases we found, Uber was trying to recruit these people as quickly as they could. And then, it didn't really do much to make Uber driving jobs very good jobs. And we saw this around the world, including South Africa, where I spent some time reporting on that.
Yeah, let's talk about that exactly. I mean, the evidence from your reporting is quite damning against Uber. Would we be able to characterize some of their behavior towards South African drivers as really quite unfair?
Yeah, so when Uber arrived in South Africa in 2013, they made this pledge to the public, to the people of South Africa, that's similar to what they said many places they expanded, which was, we are going to help uplift your economy. And to the drivers that we add to our service, we are going to provide a kind of economic stepping stone to a better life. And part of the reason I wanted to go to South Africa was to see if this kind of message resonated with people in South Africa, where there are so many people who are unemployed and potentially could stand to benefit from that message, and to see what kind of experiences the people who drove for Uber over the past nearly a decade have had for the service. And in many cases, there are some people who have had some success on the service. Some people, work very hard, and one guy told me he saved up to buy a house and to put his children through school, working very, very hard. But the predominant experience of the people that I spoke to in South Africa was that drivers in Cape Town and other places are at constant risk of being robbed, assaulted, having their cars impounded by the city. They're doing this frequently. They are renting their cars because they don't own their own cars. They're frequently working for not only Uber but for a rental car company who they have to pay out a weekly target payment. So frequently these people, even though Uber initially said when it arrived in South Africa that it was going to not only create more jobs in the country, it was going to create better paying jobs than like local taxi industry would pay. That wasn't the case for a lot of people. Some of the people that I talked to, Uber drivers end up making, less than national minimum wage, less than, 12 Rand or something like that. So people cannot afford to save up and build a better life for themselves driving for Uber, because in many cases they're just barely scraping by.
And a lot of that has to do with how they changed the commission structure. Initially, when Uber launched, it made it very attractive for drivers on its various platforms. But around a year or two later, after it's entrenched itself in a certain environment, it looks like it changes the commission structure almost overnight, disadvantaging many of those drivers, correct?
Yeah, and this is something we spoke with former executives and former managers at Uber who kind of acknowledged that this was the business plan all along, that they acknowledged that they were trying to lure drivers to the service with the idea that this is a great paying job and that you can make a lot of money on it. And initially a lot of people did find a lot of success and make better money than their previous jobs, but that was partly because Uber kind of bestowed all these subsidies and incentives on drivers who initially signed up. Over time, they also did a couple of things which changed the financial picture for a lot of drivers. One, as you say, Uber increased its commission. They went from, initially they had around 15% commission in the country. They ratcheted that up to 20, then they ratcheted it up to 25%. So Uber now takes 25% of a lot of drivers' earnings in South Africa. And another thing that they did was they have really recruited thousands and thousands of drivers on the road in South Africa, which in some places like Cape Town, where I spent time, the local industry people tell me that they've flooded the market with more cars than the market can sustain. So what that means is, Uber wants a customer who opens the app for the ETA, the wait time, to be just a few minutes. But in order to do that, they have to have a lot of drivers on the road, and a lot of those drivers are going to be sitting around waiting for a fare. And if you drive around, in the downtown areas of downtown Cape Town, you can find parking lots where there are Uber drivers just sitting there waiting for a fare. So a lot of the drivers I talked to said that when Uber flooded the market with more cars, it reduced their daily trips sometimes in half or more, which makes them work harder and harder and harder to make the same amount of money or less money.
Douglas, another thing that I found so fascinating in your reporting is where you outline that, in fact, Uber went against its own policies of introducing a cash payment system in South Africa, where initially they had lobbied against that. How many other instances, as we look at all of the information that's available to us, did Uber go against their own policy or try and muscle their way into different markets, not following, let's say, the full letter of the law?
Yeah, well, it's probably the best example that I found. This cash issue is a very controversial one for Uber, and you talk to drivers in the country. They initially, in 2014, they advertised themselves to the public as a safer option than many other transport options in South Africa. And part of the reason was because they don't have cash transactions in the car. That you have two people who can be verified using credit cards or debit cards, and that there's no money changing hands, and that there's no money being carried around in the car. When Uber decided in 2016 that it was going to think about adding cash, they saw that there was an opportunity, one, to make the service more accessible to more people, which is a good thing, and they also saw an opportunity to make more revenue. One source told me that they expected to increase their revenue in the country by 30%. But they also saw, they also really realized that this was going to cause safety issues for people, and that's what happened. They rolled out the option to pay in cash in 2016, and a lot of the people tell me that immediately resulted in Uber cars being made into targets for crime. When gangs in the Cape Flats, for example, discover that they can order an Uber using the button on their phone and it will show up with cash inside of it, that became a real serious risk for a lot of these drivers. So I think that there is this kind of concern about did Uber change its agreement with riders and change the terms of its service with riders overnight, and it does that over and over again when you look at their history of growth in South Africa.
Douglas Macmillan from the Washington Post, thank you so much for your time, and really a very insightful report coming out on practices of Uber globally as well as in South Africa. Now,